Hi, and welcome back to another video tutorial on Soundbridge. This will be tip number 2, and this involves the testing I've done in converting tracks from mono to stereo. In the particular case that I typically use this is when I have left and right overhead drums, or maybe left and right room mics in a drum kit, and I want to treat them as a stereo signal instead of mono. That way you can apply the processing together. I'm going to show you how that works and also how to change it back. So to get started, I am going to drag the mono left overhead mic track from my system up into Soundbridge. So that automatically, because that was a mono wave file, that will automatically create a mono track. I'll explain in a bit what's the difference between a mono track and a stereo track. And then this is the right sound. So if I play this back, I'll make this just a little bit bigger so we can see these more clearly. I selected both, resize one of them to increase the height, and then they'll automatically both go together. Now, if I wanted this to sound like stereo, I can access the panner by hitting Tab and then doing Pan here. And because they're grouped, they're both going together. So I've got to deselect or select this one. So now we'll have left and right. All right, so the next step is to add these to a group or create what's called a group track. In other digital audio workstations, you might call this a track folder, but it also adds essentially a bus for whatever you put into the group. It's super easy to do in this system. You just pick your 2 tracks. I did a Shift select and then Command G. It's also available from the Edit menu right here. Group tracks, you could see Command G. So I'll choose that and it's created the group. Now this looks like a folder, so I'll right click here and call this overhead stereo. Now at this point, if you click here, you can collapse that, and back on the mixer, we now have what's essentially a balance control for those 2 tracks. And you could then go in here and adjust the separation between these 2 to make them more or less stereo. So now that we have it in our group, the way to get this into a stereo track is to use the freeze function. Now the freeze function in Soundbridge is much more than a typical freeze in place. It actually allows you to export stems, and it's really powerful but also very simple. So the way we do this is to choose our group, so that's this overhead stereo that we just created, and then to a new track. And bounce blocks just means we're going to bounce everything where there's clips. Basically, blocks and clips are the same thing. We could mute the old tracks, so we'll go ahead and do that. We could normalize the tracks. We're not going to do that. That would peak normalize these while they're being changed to stereo. Click OK. It will take a few seconds here to render that. And here is our stereo file. If we play back, we'll have the same thing. At this point, we could delete the original if we wanted, and now continue to operate from here. If you don't like that pinkish color there, we could change it to something else. All right, so the next challenge here is, what if you have a stereo file and you wanted to split it to separate left and right mono tracks? So here's how I found that you can do this. The first thing is to duplicate this track, which is Command D by default. I click the track header and do Command D. Then we're going to want to pan. This top one is going to be our left. So I'll rename this to left. And this will open up where you can access the panner. And so we'll pan that all the way to the left. On this one, we will rename this to right and pan it all the way to the right. Now we'll go back to our freeze function, which is Command F, and we're going to choose left and right, two new tracks, bounce blocks, mute old tracks, and just say go. So this is our new left track and our new right track. And at this point, I no longer need these, so I'll just take them out of the project. But you can see what we have here. They're still stereo files. If we want to see them as mono tracks, then we're going to create two new mono tracks to hold these. So I'll create two additional tracks and I'll call them mono, and I'll just give them the name mono. So here's mono 1, and I just need to copy this, just drag this to the mono track. It will ask me, you're attempting to move a mono block or vice versa. Do you want to convert the block to match the channel count of the track? We're going to say yes. So basically that did that, and then we'll move this one up here and then say yes. And now you can see we've got our left and right. This mono 1 and mono 2 represent left and right. And we can hear that if we just go play it. We'll go back to the mixer with tab. And that's the two processes on how to convert. Now, what's the difference between a stereo and mono track? One thing that's kind of interesting, I'll delete these and we're going to go to a different example. If I put a stereo file in here and create a new stereo track, and I've specially prepared this so that it has completely different audio on each side. I looped over that by pressing Command L. So if I play this back, you can hear this is the right side and this is the left side. If we go to the mixer here, you'll see that for a stereo track, this is what you would call the pan control. If you hover here, it will still be called a pan control, but it's really a balance control. As you move it more to the left, you're going to hear the left channel. And as you move it more to the right, you're going to hear the right channel. So let me demonstrate that so you can see what I mean. As you operate that, you're really doing the balance between what you're hearing between these two. And it's different from panning. So what I'm going to do is create a mono channel here, or a mono track, and I'm going to copy this file over here. And it asked me about this conversion. I'm going to say no. So what I've got here is a stereo block here on a mono channel. Now, if you listen to that, you'll tell that it's in mono. And here I can open up the pan knob right here. And now this is a true pan knob. So you can imagine that on a mono channel, whatever is playing here for your blocks gets summed to mono on the pan knob, and then listen to what happens. So if you had a stereo keyboard part or something like that that you wanted to operate as a separate or some kind of a stereo affected guitar and you wanted to use it as mono, you can just drag the clip over onto a mono track and then it will behave as mono. The interesting thing about this is that you can also have these mixed up on the same track. So you can have mono blocks and stereo blocks on the same track. And you could do the same thing. I mean, this is a stereo. I can put the mono up here. It will ask me if I want to convert it. If I say no, then it will operate fine on this track. It will just send whatever you have from this mono block to, basically the left and right channels. From the track perspective, there's not much difference between a mono track and a stereo track, but from the channel in the mixer, it is different in the sense of how it operates with a pan control or a stereo balance control. Very similar to how it works on a hardware mixer where you have stereo channels or mono channels. I think it's very clever the way that it's been laid out to be simple, and yet you have enough flexibility here to get most things done. The one thing I found you cannot do is you cannot export anything to a mono file. So if you needed a mono file, and the reason that I would need a mono file is if you're doing voiceover and you're submitting a voiceover file, or if you're doing an audiobook. I don't know if anybody would do an audiobook with Soundbridge, but if you're doing that type of thing, you would need to export as an actual mono MP3 file. It's not hard to convert it using some external tools, but it would be kind of nice to have a mono export sometime in the future. That's probably more than you ever wanted to know about converting between stereo and mono tracks, and the handling of stereo channels in Soundbridge. Thanks for watching. We'll see you in another one of these very soon.